from Booger Hollow in a place called Toadsuck, which is down the road from Pickles Gap. And yes, these are all places.
Yeah, I've been there. They're actually real.
Yeah. Barcode actually came and visited.
Unrelated reason.
Toadsuck. So yeah. Anyway, at that point, there was a lot of stuff going on, and so we did. There was a lot of cloning that was happening with cellular phones. One thing that was a popular device was called a DDI, and so just a quick crash course on analog cell phones. There was no security. Anything that you sent through the air, like your ESN, your min pair, like everything having to do with your phone, just got sent completely in the clear. And so the obvious solution that Congress came up with for this, rather than mandating digital technology that would have been more secure, is they made it illegal to listen to certain radio frequencies. And I'm sure that we all in this room would never do anything the government doesn't want in that area. So if you had a Radio Shack scanner that wasn't even modified, it was just a little older than the current year, and you had a computer with a piece of software loaded on it, you could just snarf ESN min pairs out of the day. And an ESN min pair is like basically all the information you need to clone somebody's phone. You could snarf all this out of the air all day long, and so that kind of happened. We were in Las Vegas, and I remember sitting in a hotel room with this guy and a couple other people from Oregon at DEF CON 2, I think. And, we're just, I have never seen ESN min pairs come across a computer screen as quickly as on the Strip in Las Vegas. It was just bam, 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 bam. It was nuts, because, where are you going to go to clone cell phones except where people are making a lot of phone calls? One of the carriers there, who was the carrier that had the really cool announcements? Do you remember who that was in Las Vegas? Well, eventually they got acquired by Sprint, but they had some really awesome announcements when you called out. It'd go da-da-da-da, and then your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and try again. This is a message from the cellular carrier Las Vegas. There were Oki 900s if you wanted to clone a phone, and that was the most preferred model, since you could take a chip out, replace it with a different one that had been programmed with software that would allow you to very easily input ESN min pairs that you snarfed with a DDI or got from other sources. And there were code lines where people would post ESN min pairs and BBSs that were full of these things. And a Motorola Brick was another popular phone because it was a lot cheaper. You could pick them up in pawn shops for like $10 at the time. And all you had to do was solder it to a parallel port, and you could program them through your computer. And so, me being broke, that's what I used. At the time, there were manual billing arrangements. You didn't have this electronic billing that you have now, so you could go like trashing for ESN min pairs like at a cellular store somewhere in, say, Mississippi, down the road from Booger Hollow, and then you could take those pairs up to, say, like, Seattle, and you could use them for a good month. And then when the bill for $1 billion like got mailed on paper on like 700 pages to the cellular carrier in Mississippi, only then would your ESN min pair get killed. So, having a pair that would last for a long time was kind of a big deal. So there were A and B sides on cellulars. You would have some A side carriers that interoperated sort of, and they could do follow me roaming. And then there were B side carriers that used a different system. B side used a system called Mobile Link and in general, and then the A side used a system called the NACN. Now you just get on a plane, land, fire up your phone, and it works, and you don't have any of these considerations. But some A-side carriers operated service on both the A and B side, and US West Cellular was one of these. They operated an A-side system in Omaha and a B-side system nearly everywhere else. So if you took a carrier's ESN min pair and you operated it on the opposite system of them, that was even better because you could receive incoming calls in your market and you would never ring the other guy's phone. So you could, and none of the systems that dealt with follow me roaming linked up. So it was kind of fun. Like cellular freaking gave a lot of opportunities for interesting stuff. The Felon, one of our friends who's still active on Telefreak, cloned I think half of Omaha. He was kind of in business for himself, sort of, and got a little busted for that. And then one of the best prank calls that we made was, B-String called in to a conf. And We made a call to the White House and needed to urgently speak to the Secret Service to find out, whether or not the president used Amway products. This was, after one of those Amway conferences, this was something that we really, really needed to know. So they asked for a lot of information personal about ourselves, and I'm sure whatever we told them was accurate, and then told us that it was none of our business whether the president used Amway products. So I think President Clinton definitely used Amway products. And immediately after that, I've never seen an ESN min pair killed so quickly. 10 minutes later, B-String called back into the conf, and he's like, man, fuck you, man. My ESN min pair got all toasty, man. What the hell you doing having me call that number, man? It was pretty fun. Then kind of things came crashing down, and some of us started going to jail. And this guy is one of the ones who got busted. Barcode Magnate and Dr. Havoc all got busted in the same week. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is that the feds are a lot more clued now than they used to be. Some phone shenanigans, they're typically willing to not really get involved with if it doesn't really have anything to do with terrorism or stealing money or anything along those lines. Back then, if you were a hacker, you were as good as a terrorist as far as these guys were concerned. They had not been trained. They didn't really realize that crimes with computers were the same as crimes with other crimes, and crimes with other mediums. And they didn't really understand what computer crime was. So you were dealing with a very, very aggressive law enforcement atmosphere. And the other thing that was kind of fun was there was a lot of infighting. The FBI and the Secret Service couldn't make up their mind who was responsible for what. And so sometimes you had people getting busted by both law enforcement agencies on successive days for the same things, and that resulted in a lot of cases not coming off very well. So the feds, to their credit, have much more of a clue now than they used to, so you really have to take yourself back to that time. But Barcode probably ought to talk about his bust.
Yeah, I ought to jump in here. I gotta take 5 minutes from you. So I'm at TourCon Seattle 2008. And the prophet's about to go up and give this talk. And he says, oh, I'm going up, I'm going to give this talk. I said, oh, that's great. What's it about? He's like, oh, it's about that thing where your mom got pulled out of the shower naked at gunpoint. Oh, that's cool. But it did get me thinking that trying to delineate hacker generations, you can come up with a lot of ways to do it. You can say, oh, one generation of hackers existed before, your mom had an email address, and after that it's the next generation, or before, pick any type of major topic, before, we were charging for domains. But I think that a really good way to delineate generations of hackers is the point at which the feds stopped being the bad guy, or we stopped being the bad guy to the feds. And that was relatively recently. Obviously there's still many exceptions to this rule, but there was a point not long ago where I was, us in Sacramento, and this is a story I'm specifically going to tell, I'm going to breeze through this very quickly, but in Sacramento when the 2600 meeting started, we had an incredibly adversarial relationship with the cops, basically. That 2600 meeting was...
Sacramento County High-Tech Crime Squad, which was newly established and it had something to prove.
Well, no, there was a good reason they were established, to be fair. So Sacramento 2600 was relatively sizable, and everybody there was up to some sort of shady BS. I mean, it was, to be perfectly honest, these were pretty shady people, including myself to a certain extent. But one particular thing happened, and some of you will know about this and some of you won't, but there was a gentleman named Josh Cohen. His nickname was Pac Bell, rest in peace. And he stole something in the 7 figures of hardware from Hewlett-Packard and sold it to the mob. And he was part of the 2600 crew. So this did not bode well for us. As soon as this occurred, we became public enemy #1, and they formed this high-tech crime task force, and they were actively surveilling us. This isn't like one of those paranoid things. They actually had people with like telephoto lenses on the other side of the mall from the 2600 meeting, and we would just walk right up to them and be like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so the Spot the Fed contest at DEF CON, isn't a joke.
Well,
it started out being real.
Well, and to be fair, the San Francisco 2600 meeting also had people surveilling us just because they were jerks like that, and they decided to come get us, which was actually pretty funny, to be fair.
So, hey, let's spot the Fed. Who's a Fed? Raise your hand.
There you go. Nice.
But they still won't tell you.
One of the side effects of this was that being young and pretty arrogant, it was kind of like an ongoing Cold War where we would do things to aggravate them, they would do things to aggravate us, and they even would send undercover officers to the meeting, but we would invite them back to the after party, run their plates, find out they're cops, and walk right up to them and be like, you're a cop, and they would be, oh, no, I'm not. I'm like, really? Because this says YAR, and and they didn't like that very much. And that happened like 3 times. And at some point you figure like, God, use someone else's car. It's been like 3 times, like in the same 6-month period. So, and the thing that really made things worse was one time there was a particular hacker that, as kind of a retaliatory thing, he pulled the blueprints of the lead detective's home and Xeroxed
Which you
them.
can still do. They're public record for now.
Yeah, Xeroxed them and brought them to 2600 and just handed them out. And of course there was a cop there, and that got back very quickly. And this happened at a very strange time period, and we're going to rapidly fast forward through a crazy sequence of events. A couple of friends of ours got busted for some pretty strange hacks. One thing that happened was a friend of ours accidentally, and this is actually the truth, he was trying to break into a system, and that was intentional, and he did. But what he didn't know was that the system was actually some sort of control system for a dam.
Yeah, it was a SCADA system, like controlling the Columbia River.
So the Secret Service or FBI or somebody got called in. He got busted for this.
And this was in Canada, too. Like, it was the RCMP that went after him.
Yeah. And so he got busted. He kind of gave some information up, but not really. He was actually a really cool guy, and he tried to, kind of protect everybody. But that led to the Conf, because he was calling into the Conf. So the Conf started getting monitored by some sort of law enforcement agency, and one by one they started picking us off. And we knew this was happening, and it started with a guy named Magnate, who we brought up earlier. Magnate is just the worst person ever, and he really wanted to get caught. Like everything he was doing, thank you, C. Stone, he really was the worst person ever. He really wanted to get caught. He did really, this guy was like on a clone phone in a stolen Buick, driving over metal road cones, throwing up like a fishtail of sparks behind him on the freeway with both fingers up out the window. This is not a fake story. It was between Sacramento and Lodi. He actually did this. And then just claimed ignorance. Like, I was having a seizure or something, and he got away with it. Great BS artist. So he gets busted, surprisingly enough, while he's driving around. He's literally on the Conf. I'm going to Taco Bell to try to pull some sort of scam, and he drops. And we get really suspicious because some other people had recently dropped, and we call his employer the next day, find out he hadn't shown up for work, he was still in school, called his school, found out he hadn't shown up, and at that point we knew we were completely screwed. That was it. Sure enough, Magnate gave all of us up. He, by name, gave up my home address, totally dumped all of our docs, and we knew this was happening. This was 3 days before DEF CON 4. So I'd never met the Prophet in person at this point. We all go into, I don't know about these guys, but I went into complete fucking panic mode. I'm not gonna lie, I was absolutely terrified. It was really scary to think, like, these guys, I've been doing things that are clearly wrong. I wasn't stealing from people, I wasn't doing credit card fraud, I was actually, on the scale of things, kind of okay, but I had done some things. And these guys were coming to get me, they knew where I lived. My brother called me and said, there's like old men taking photos of our house from a Ford. And I said, well, yeah. So we all go to DEF CON 4, completely paranoid, get in a rental van, drive to the middle of the desert, and essentially have this frank conversation saying like, okay, what do we all need to know? Because we've been incredibly vague over the phone for the past couple weeks. We've been paranoid to kind of get our stories straight. Go back home, I get back to Sacramento, and a week later, they literally came through the windows at my parents' house. I wasn't there, I was on my way to a 2600 meeting. And
if they knew what they were doing, they would have just gone there.
They pulled my mom out of the shower. It was totally over the top. And this is so funny that I can't even believe it actually happened. My brother is sitting on the computer in the house, and he's playing Police Quest. Right? Now it gets better. It gets better. And they bust in. They didn't know what I looked like. I don't know how that's possible, but they didn't know what I looked like. And Mike Menz, this detective, has his weapon. My brother's 3 years younger than me, and he says, "Freeze, Matt!" And my brother is fucking brilliant. He just goes, "I'm not Matt." And he walked out of the room. Like,
nice.
No, hold on. So the cop, no, not my brother. The cop walks out of the room, leaving my brother at the keyboard. And I'm thinking, that's fucking brilliant. You could just like, next time I get busted, I'm just like, I'm not Matt, delete everything, fucking smash it. I couldn't believe it. So they go into my room, and in my room, of course, they found my case open with IDE cables hanging there because the week before I threw my hard drives in the goddamn lake, because I thought they were coming. So I'd thrown everything out, and they did get some stuff on me, and eventually I was prosecuted. But what we'd agreed to before this, and I'll